Hello, everyone. This is Rolo, the Puerto Rican pistolero, and I am coming to you live from beautiful Miami, Florida. It was supposed to be like thunderstorms today and hail and all that stuff, but it hasn't happened yet. Maybe it'll go down during the show, and but I'm happy because I've got power and all that stuff, because you know how crazy the storms can be here in Florida. This is a kind of a special episode of Rolo's Rants in a way. It will be the final episode of Rolo's Rants on the Puerto Rican Pistolero YouTube channel. And, you know, I guess I'll start off with like just a little bit of, a little bit of story time going in here. I see that Confucius is here. Comic Misconceptions at first, as always. We've got Wayfarer, Hypnotic, my Puerto Rican brother from another mother, Bong Donkey, JM the Elite Fan, Axzilla, and Night Train. Night Train, good to see you. Good to see you here. So yeah, it's a little bit of a bittersweet episode. You know, we'll go down slightly down memory lane here and kind of talk about how this Greg the Goblin dropping the 20. Greg dropped the 50 yesterday, dropping the 20 today. Greg has just been probably the biggest supporter of this channel, especially, you know, in the last year. I really appreciate you, Greg. You've been incredible. Shout out to Hypnotic. He's going to be playing some Fortnite with us next Friday during our Fortnite stream here on this channel. So I'm looking forward to that. Johnny Zeltroid, also known as Johnny64, jumped on a little bit with us the other day, but I had things to do after the stream, so unfortunately we could only play one match. But Hypnotic will be here for, you know, at least a couple of hours. I know he's been blowing up. He's in the top 5 of super chats now on YouTube. So congratulations, dude. I am extremely proud of you. That is great to hear. He is blowing up all over and laying it down, going against the woke mob, and they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do when they see a Hispanic dude dominating the situation, because none of their narratives can work against him, and Hypnotic doesn't even have to use it against him. it's just there. So congratulations to you, brother. I am happy that you are kicking ass and taking names. It's been great to see. I know a little over a year ago, when I first, you know, heard about Hypnotic, he'd invited myself and a lot of my peers on a Saturday night hypnosis. So it is, you know, I think you were only at like 8 or 9,000 subs at that time, and you've blown up to over 40,000. So it's pretty awesome to see how you've grown, and you're gonna break 100,000 in no time. So I'm looking forward to seeing your continued success. And I'm glad that you'll be joining us on Fortnite. That should be a lot of fun. Josie gifted a Puerto Rican Pistolero membership to Bong Donkey. Thank you so much, Joe C1818. Look at that. The notifications are actually working today. This is crazy. That's pretty awesome. So yeah, today's a little bit of a bittersweet day, because as some of you may know, I know some of you started following this channel, or what it used to be, the Locked and Loaded Latinos, when we had become part of Geeks and Gamers a couple of years ago. We got a lot of new people following us, but a lot of you are OGs. They have been around since the early days where this was just a Second Amendment channel and political channel. We talked about history, the Constitution, and things like that. So it's a little bit bittersweet. You know, I have noticed, well, I mean, a few months ago, I wasn't even sure I was going to continue the YouTube thing, you know, based on, you know, a lot of things that happened in my life, things that had changed, you know, that you guys know the story behind that. And so for a while, I was thinking about whether I was going to continue YouTube or not, and especially kind of the political commentary. And it's kind of something that I've struggled with for a bit, I'm not going to lie, about what I was going to do, the direction I was going to go. And, this channel has gone through a decent amount of changes with the name change and kind of the expansion of gaming content here. So unfortunately, the YouTube overlords have punished this channel heavily, especially recently for doing both. So I decided that the best move was, we've been obviously streaming on other platforms. So shout out to everybody on the alternative platforms out there. I appreciate you all on Kick, Rumble, and even X, which X has actually been doing pretty well. It's interesting how that has started to grow over the last couple of months. So I appreciate all of you that have tuned in on those other platforms. But things have unfortunately, the YouTube overlords have punished me for being too based on too many different subjects here. So I've decided that I'd love to be on Hank's show. I actually miss those days. I miss Hank and Lola, and all of them. So yeah, I'd love to be out there, but I haven't spoken to Hank in a minute. I hope that he and Lola are doing well, and that kind of goes to a little bit about the story of how kind of this all started. A few years ago, and I've told the story ad nauseum, so I'll keep it a little bit brief. But I think it's important to know how this channel kind of came to be. I got into Second Amendment advocacy out of nowhere. I've been off of social media for years prior to, the Parkland, the Parkland massacre, this tragic event down here that happened on Valentine's Day in, I believe it was 2017. And that kind of took us on a journey, or let's see when that was. And, it kind of took me on a journey down the path of the Second Amendment. I've been a gun owner since I was 21 years old. Purchased my first pistol. It was actually a Springfield XD 45 back in the day, because that's what all my buddies had, and everybody was rocking 45s because that is America's round. And yeah, so that was the first firearm that it was in 2018, and that I had ever purchased in my life. My parents hadn't been gun owners. My dad was a veteran of the military, but grew up Puerto Rican, and in Puerto Rico, gun laws are pretty strict, and they were until recently. So didn't really grow up with a gun, kind of gun culture within my household. Never had anything against them or anything like that. My parents have always been supportive of the Second Amendment, the Constitution, just not something that we were ever exposed to. So after a lot of my friends fought in the War on Terror that were older than I was at the time. I was a young buck freshman in high school when September 11th occurred. And, a lot of my buddies came back from their first deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan, Marines, of course. And, they taught me how to shoot various firearms, everything from, M19 Berettas, M4, Benelli M4 shotguns, AK-47s, ARs, all that good stuff back in the day. And I had the bug after that. And that's when my passion for the Second Amendment and firearms really grew. And then following Parkland and the betrayal of the Republican Party here in Florida, when it came to our gun rights, I realized that, things needed to change. And that is something that I needed to become a little bit more passionate about. And so that's something I started getting into, went back into social media and discovered the entire Second Amendment advocacy space there. And kind of grew from there, made a lot of different connections in the gun community, especially in the black gun community. We were mentored by Kevin Dixie, Tony Simon, and Argo J. Shout out to those excellent gentlemen and the work that they've done in their communities and what they've done for the Second Amendment over the last, decades in some cases for them. And, I really remember, I was never into identity politics or anything like that, but they pointed out kind of a need in the Latin community to have kind of a different voice and perspective, because culturally, the Second Amendment is not something that is embraced by the Latin community. It's not commonplace here, just because so many people have come from other countries that don't have that, or have a very negative connotation to gun ownership, because a lot of times the only people that own guns in Central and South America are authoritarian governments or cartels and criminal organizations. So, despite that, and despite the kind of logically thinking as an American, how it would be like, well, those are the people that should want to embrace firearms and defending their rights more than any other. And you'd think that, but it wasn't the case. So, kind of got started in that space. At first, it was just out of interest and fun, hobbies and things like that. And then as we got to know more people, and I say we because you guys know who my co-host used to be, got more into that. Hank Strange was one of the first that invited, me to his podcast. And then from there, being a guest a few times and being mentored by all these great men and women, they said, hey, you should start a podcast. And that's kind of how the Locked and Loaded Latinos was born. So ever since then, this was a Second Amendment history and current event channel. The rants that I would go on and the tirades became pretty notorious throughout the space. And I know it's something that everybody liked. And it's something that I have always been, very passionate about. And it just kind of grew into its own thing. Eventually got to meet Eric July, and that's how that kind of whole side started. Always have had all the stuff, the gaming stuff, the pop culture stuff in the background, because I always wanted to show a different side of gun ownership and even the video game space, that you can kind of straddle these two different cultures. And that's what being a multifaceted individual is all about. You have different hobbies, different things that you're passionate about. And I do feel that the millennial and Gen Z generations have actually embraced gun ownership. Gun culture 2.0, I believe, is a real thing through YouTubers, social media, and all of that. And the work that other people have done with online advocacy on social media platforms has done a lot of good for the Second Amendment, despite the propaganda war that we always fight against with, organizations like Everytown and Moms Demand Action, Bloomberg, and that ilk. And obviously the anti-gun authoritarian politicians that exist out there. So, that's how that all got started. And then, kind of when we got into more things and hung out with different groups, the channels lost a little bit of focus, but it was always great because I appreciated the fact that so many of you came from a different side of the internet. And I know one of the compliments I got early on after jumping on Fortnite streams with that group of folks back in the day was that, people didn't know that there was this voice out there that I talked about these different things. And a lot of people appreciated it. So it was great. It was always kind of like a Trojan horse goal of mine to use those connections to kind of advance the cause of freedom and the Second Amendment to a different group of people that maybe wouldn't have been exposed to it or didn't realize, like, hey, there's somebody else out there that is into the same things that I am, that loves the movies that I do, that loves the video games that I do, and they happen to be a gun owner, and they're I guess fairly young, even though I'm older than most people. People seem to think that I am at first glance. So it's been a great journey throughout all that. But as as things have changed in my life, and kind of I've seen how things are in the space. I changed the channel now that I'm riding solo, and started Rolo's Rants, and I've been happy with the show, how it's been, but YouTube hasn't been. So I decided, it was a bit reluctant. It's something that you guys know I've been thinking about for a few weeks, to split the channel. And I think because gaming centric content has become, 3/4 of what is streamed on this channel at this point, that the political content really needed its own home rather than leaving it here and splitting the gaming content off to another channel. So that's what I decided to do. The link is there in the chat on YouTube. The other platforms won't change. I'll still, Rolo's Rants will still be there on all the other platforms, because they haven't grown as much yet. And I think that there's still some room for them. So you can still catch this show on, Kick, Rumble, and X going forward, same time. But Rolo's Rants will be moving to its own channel just called Rolo's Rants. So go ahead and subscribe to that. It'll start next week. I've got a guest lined up. Should be in the next few weeks. She's going to be a great guest, somebody that I have not had the opportunity to have a conversation with before in the Second Amendment space, but I'm looking forward to speaking with her, and she's excited about being able to rant. That was the number one thing that she was excited about. She's like, so we just get to rant about whatever we want. And I was like, yeah, that's totally what I do all the time. So you're more than welcome to come on and say your piece. So once that's confirmed, I will announce that guest, and I'm looking forward to that. But it's kind of the end of an era here. It's a little bit bittersweet. I don't know how it's going to work out, but I hope that you will all that are interested in that type of content. It's going to be purely going back to the roots of what this channel was originally all about. So we're not really going to talk about pop culture content or anything like that unless it has a direct overlap with the political and Second Amendment spaces. So it will be purely Second Amendment politics and current events. Pretty much what this was from the start. The gaming streams will stay here. Maybe eventually I'll talk about some pop culture stuff here as well if you guys are interested. But that was the focus. It's so that's pretty much where we will. That's pretty much how we'll do it here. So neither show or set of streams is going anywhere. But we'll see how that goes going forward. And yeah, it should be pretty interesting. Let's see. So today there is a lot of stuff going on. This morning, it pretty much went down the wire that a helicopter carrying the president of Iran, went down over Azerbaijan, and we've got conflicting reports over, what happened, if there are survivors, and things like that. So that's obviously the big news of the day, especially in the midst of the war between Israel and Hamas, and the Iranian attacks, the attacks by Iranian proxies on Israel and Western shipping throughout the region. So Sydney Sweeney, Sully Buck, that'd be pretty funny if we had Sydney Sweeney on as a guest. I'm sure that she'd be pretty cool to talk to. I'm not sure if we did that. No, you didn't lose another one, but sometimes things change. Cognicat. So that's just the way things are sometimes. It's just the way that it is. Things have changed over the last few months. As far as shows that I've been on and things like that. So I think that this is kind of the best way for the show to grow and to continue on my own. But every once in a while you'll still see some people here. You'll catch me on Epic Verse every week with Josiah, Epic Mike, Benology, and Chaz Rough Night. So if you want my kind of entertainment commentary that you may have missed on other big YouTube channels that I used to be a part of, that's kind of where you can find a little bit of that. If you want to hear my opinions on, gaming and the culture space, I'll throw my 2 cents here every once in a while. But that's not necessarily why I got started on YouTube, even though I would say that I'm probably my commentary in that space is probably almost as good as my political commentary if I toot my own horn, just because I pay attention to that space. So that's where you can catch me for that kind of stuff, if that floats your boat. Obviously, here, the Fortnite streams are going to continue on Thursdays and Fridays. I've been playing other games too, like Dark Souls and Destiny. So that stuff's not going to go away. Hopefully, you'll see more of different people joining us on the streams, like Hypnotic and Johnny. And maybe one day we'll get Disbrew and Mike back on to do some Ready or Not or something else like that. But I know those guys are really busy. Mike has been doing his own nightly stream. And so, okay, I see what you mean, Cognicat. On his own stream there. So it's been difficult getting everybody kind of organized to do that. But I think that you guys have enjoyed watching my brother, Commander N, and the old man Pistolero joining me and giving you some wholesome family streaming time lately. And you've seen the journey of my dad trying to play different games and get better at Fortnite with some of the shenanigans that are involved in that. So that's not going to go away. That's all part of what we're doing here, and it's something I'm looking forward to continue. That's really become something that I've enjoyed doing a lot, and yeah, that's not going to stop. So yeah, I'm glad that you guys like it. Bullet Train. So, God. Oh man, you guys are crazy. Wayfarer, you are crazy. I'm not even gonna. I've got nothing to say about that. But yeah, go ahead and check out the new channel. I already have one video there, just a clip from last week's episode. So I'll do more of that, taking clips out, posting it on there. The new show is obviously going to be on there. I'm looking forward to that and being able to refocus that again. But again, tonight, we're going to talk about the biggest news, which is what happened with the Iranian president. So let's refresh this to see where we are at here and get the latest and see what the deal is here. So here's Rolo's Rants. For those of you that want to subscribe, this is what it looks like. So go ahead and check that out. And I appreciate all of you. So go ahead and give that a sub. We're at 63, which is not bad. 67 now. Look at that. Just had to refresh it. So thank you guys for following me over there on Rolo's Rants, and we will see a lot more on that channel later. But without further ado, let's get this going over here. So from the Daily Mail, Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi, probably mispronouncing that, but it is what it is seen in eerie photo moments before helicopter crash. Hamas-backing leader is missing amid fears his death will spark a power vacuum in Tehran. So I'll read the article, and then I'll kind of go some of my theories of what I think may have been going on and why or why not those may be plausible theories, or things that people have been talking about in the rumor mill. I see some of you in the chat already have some speculation over what may have occurred there today, and what may have happened with this particular incident. But let's go straight through the news here. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi was pictured moments before the helicopter crash near the border with Azerbaijan, which put his life at risk, quote unquote. He was seen staring out the window of the aircraft, which was traveling in Iran's eastern Azerbaijan province near Jolfa, around 375 miles northwest of Tehran, when it crashed. There have been conflicting reports among Iranian state media about whether the helicopter has been found following a frantic search mission. For those of you that don't know, and I've covered it here, when discussing a potential conflict with Iran, Iran is extremely mountainous, and the terrain is very treacherous. That's what would make an invasion extremely difficult. It's also why the Iraqis had a lot of trouble in the Iran-Iraq war back in the 80s. You can go into Iran, but you're immediately almost going to hit big mountain ranges that kind of surround the interior capital region. So I wouldn't be surprised if, a helicopter is not very large, depending on how many helicopters there were or what the weather conditions are. It could be very difficult, to find or, be able to mount a rescue operation if that's something, or recovery. The president is still missing hours after the crash, and there's no confirmation that they're close to finding Raisi. It has led to fears that his death could spark a power vacuum in Iran. The helicopter was one of a convoy of 3, and Foreign Minister Hossein Amira Dolahian, a Friday prayer imam Sayyid Muhammad Ali al-Hashem, and other high-ranking officials were also reportedly on the helicopter with the president. So this is a potentially massive loss of Iranian leadership. And it's going to beg the question of Was this, something that happened because of weather or mechanical malfunction, or could there be something more nefarious involved? And that's something that we'll discuss here in a few minutes. Their lives are at risk following the crash over mountain terrain. An Iranian official told Reuters all Army and Iranian Guard resources were utilized in the search efforts for the helicopter. And then you can see some photos of him right here and the helicopter that was involved. It looks like a Bell, like a civilian version of like the UH-1 platform from what I can see, which is, pretty standard fare in civilian use or diplomatic use or anything like that throughout the world. And then you can see right here, we have the location where it potentially went down. The helicopter crashed as it was crossing mountainous terrain in heavy fog. Well, there you go. On the way back from a visit to the border with Azerbaijan. So it almost has echoes of what happened with Kobe Bryant, when he and his daughter and those other 3 people passed away when their helicopter went through a fog bank and crashed. So unfortunately, this is something that can happen with any type of aircraft when you have poor visibility. And helicopters are notoriously unsafe. I forgot what the quote is. I think it was in a Call of Duty game, when they have the loading screens and they have, they used to put quotes on the bottom. I don't know if they still do that. I haven't really played Call of Duty in years. But they used to put one quote was, if the aircraft's wings spin faster or move faster than the fuselage, then it is a helicopter and your life is in danger. So helicopters are, I don't think I've ever ridden in a helicopter. My old man has done it as part of the military, and he says he hates flying in helicopters. It's never as pleasant as being in a regular airplane. So, especially in these types of conditions, mountainous terrain, helicopters can have more of a difficult time. They can't really go over the weather. So they kind of have to go through, or they're going to ground themselves. So who knows what may have happened here. This is starting to sound to me like it could have just been an accident. They took a gamble and they may have lost here. So, and this also is going to cause issues with the rescue effort. So rescuers were hampered in their efforts to reach the site by poor weather conditions in the area. There's been contact with a passenger and crew member on board the helicopter, but this is according to Iranian state television. Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has said he is praying for President Ibrahim Raisi's safety. Comes after Iranian news agency Tasman reported some of the president's companions in this helicopter were able to communicate with central headquarters, raising hopes that the incident could have ended without casualties. The problem is that they're not being specific. This is a very ambiguous statement. Some of his companions, why would they not say, hey, yeah, we crash landed, the president is safe, we're just waiting here, we're hunkering down, and we're just going to chill until you guys get here. So typically a country like Iran or any authoritarian states, Russia, China, they're going to lie about stuff like this. They really are. And they are going to cover up any sort of weakness, any sort of tension, power vacuum, anything like that may be occurring. So the fact that they have kept this statement so ambiguous and they're not really trying to confirm or deny, that kind of tells me that this is not the best news. And they're really trying to, they either don't actually know what the real situation is. So I would believe that they don't actually have contact with anyone on the ground, or they already know that, he's dead and all these people are dead, and they're trying to limit the social damage that's going to cause within their government and try to figure out how the hierarchy is going to continue. The president is supposedly the second in command here after Khamenei, the Ayatollah. So this is potentially a huge, huge loss for Iranian leadership. And with kind of the tenuous position that they've been over the last few years after the Arab Spring, and with everything that's been going on with Israel and their massive, ballistic missile, drone, and cruise missile attempted strike against Israel, this really is Very poor timing, kind of coincidental for Iran. Sayed Mohammed Ali Al-Hashman, Tabriz's Friday prayer imam, and Foreign Minister Hossein Dolahian were also reportedly on the helicopter with the president. President Joe Biden has been briefed on the incident, according to the White House, and the U.S. is closely watching reports. And thank you, Bullet Train and Sully Bach, or Bullet Train, for gifting that Candungero membership. I appreciate you, and Sully Bach received it. How's it going, Lee Kramer? We got a lot of people here tonight. I appreciate it. We got 30 people watching right now. That is awesome. And we've got more likes than people watching, which is always great. Iraq has offered to help Iran in the search and rescue. Hamas issued a statement following the helicopter crash, expressing great concern over the incident. In this painful incident, we express our full solidarity with the Islamic Republic of Iran, its leadership, government, and people, and we ask Allah Almighty to protect and ensure the safety of the Iranian president and his accompanying delegation, and to keep all harm away from the brotherly Iranian people, the militant group said. Raisi's death would mark a monumental moment for Iran and the Middle East region, as there are fears of instability among the Iranian regime. He has developed a brutal reputation, which earned him the nickname the Butcher of Tehran. I mean, no surprise there, right? Joe C., member for 3 months. Axling my ass, no way a president will fly anywhere on Earth without an escort. This doesn't pass the smell test. It is very interesting. They did say he had 2 other helicopters. So, I mean, I'll throw some of my speculation out here now, and then we'll continue this article. You know, my first gut when when someone told me about this earlier was, that it was a hit. That this, that the Mossad, or maybe the CIA, the Mossad obviously being Israel's intelligence agency, or, the CIA may have done this. Hearing about the weather, I'm not 100% sure, even though that would be good cover, but then you got to get really lucky, have assets in place, or, have sabotage, things like that. So is it possible? Absolutely. If Mossad if it was ever found out that Mossad did that, that would cause some serious problems, I think, because political assassinations are pretty taboo in the in the modern era, unless you're, Iran, Russia, maybe China. So it's a bit uncouth, but all's fair in love and war, and it's possible that maybe the intelligence agencies just couldn't resist themselves. But I think that would probably cause, there would have to be a lot of calculus involved here over whether the U.S. government or the Israeli government would do something like this. And, they would really have to weigh this heavily, because already with the strike on the consulate that Israel had, that was a huge gamble on their part. It resulted in an Iranian counterattack that was, though it was ineffective, it was definitely nothing to sneeze at. So it does make you wonder: are they trying to make a move and weaken their adversary? Maybe they've seen what the political repercussions would be on the ground. I've always thought that the way to take Iran down effectively, especially without massive involvement of the military and potentially leading to World War III, or opening up, other avenues of invasion by other countries. So Russia and China getting involved even more in their respective spheres, would be to start a political revolution in Iran. We know that they have a massive young population that is anti the regime. They're pro women's rights. So that's something that, it's starting a color revolution, so to speak. So a social revolution to overthrow the government is the most feasible way, especially to keep us from going to war with them. So could it be that this is, a move to start that? Could it be that there are elements within Iran that are tired of the regime, and this was an assassination attempt from within? That's also very possible. especially, being an inside job, especially if the helicopter went down with mechanical issues. That very well could be. Could those elements have gotten intel or, maybe material assistance from a Western intelligence agency? Yeah, that's definitely possible. I wouldn't be surprised by anything at this point. You guys know, you guys know what I always think about those things. But I think it would almost be more realistic to say an element within Iran would do that themselves, for one reason or another. But that's kind of where I'm going with this. And again, the fact that the Iranian state television, the Iranian government is, and I know I go back between Iranian and Iranian, so just bear with me here. It seems like both or neither are correct, so I'm going to use them both depending on my mood. Are really being very ambiguous about all of this, and it is on purpose, because that just tells me either it's bad news or they don't know. If it was good news, they would just put it out there right away, and they'd be like, yeah, we talked to him, blah, blah, blah. So the fact that they can't do that, and they're unwilling to fully lie about whether they're survivors or not, knows that they would not be able to cover it up, and two, they probably just don't know yet. So Raisi's death would mark a monumental moment for Iran in the Middle East. He's developed a brutal reputation, which has earned him the nickname of the Butcher of Tehran, but the supreme leader will likely choose a similar hardliner to replace him in case of his death. A rescue, one local government, there was no immediate elaboration on what happened to the helicopter or what led to the incident. One local government official used the word crash to describe the incident, but he acknowledged to an Iranian newspaper that he had yet to reach the site himself. State TV aired images of SUVs racing through a wooded area. A rescue helicopter tried to reach the area where authorities believe Raisi's helicopter was, but it couldn't land due to heavy mist. Emergency services spokesman Babek Yektaparast said the esteemed president and company were on their way back from aboard some helicopters, and one of the helicopters was forced to make a hard landing due to bad weather and fog. Interior Minister Ahmad Vahadi said in comments aired on state TV. Various rescue teams are on their way to the region, but because of the poor weather and fogginess, it may take time for them to reach the helicopter. He said the region is a bit rugged and it's difficult to make contact. We're waiting for rescue teams to reach the landing site and give us more information. Okay, so more photos of everything that's going on. Hardliners urged the public to pray for Raisi. State TV later aired images of the faithful praying at Imam Reza Shrine in the city of Mashhad, one of Shiite Islam's holiest sites. The likely crash comes as Iran, under Raisi and Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, launched an unprecedented drone and missile attack on Israel just last month. Iran flies a variety of helicopters in the country, but international sanctions make it difficult to obtain parts for them. Its military air fleet also largely dates back to before the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Raisi had been in Azerbaijan early Sunday to inaugurate a dam on the Aras River with Azerbaijan's President Aliyev. The dam is the third one that the two nations have built on the Aras River. The visit came despite chilly relations between the two nations, including over a gun attack on Azerbaijan's embassy in Tehran in 2023. I'd never heard of that. And Azerbaijan's diplomatic relations with Israel, which Iran's Shiite theocracy views as its main enemy in the region. Raisi, 63, is a hardliner who formerly led the country's judiciary. Now, again, the interesting thing about Iran is, trying to figure out the threat that they actually, the threat that they fully pose right now. Now, we know that they obviously have spoken a hard game about annihilating Israel and wanting to destroy the West. They fund terrorist organizations and rebel groups throughout the entire world. They have proxies that attack, Western shipping and Western, troops pretty continuously. They led and helped the insurgency during the Iraq War and, were responsible for the deaths of hundreds or even thousands of American service members in that conflict. So, we've kind of been dealing with them for years, but asymmetric warfare has been the name of the game. Obviously, their nuclear program has been something that I guess we've attempted to stop. And I say I guess it because I'm being partially facetious here in saying that, you know, it seems like depending on which administration we have, Iran is getting money or they're losing money from the United States. Now they've gotten money from this administration, and that has, you know, obviously allowed them to, and they got money from the Obama administration. We remember the infamous pallets being delivered in the middle of the night a few years ago. So, you know, we've essentially funded a lot of their exploits in the Middle East, funded their attacks against ourselves and our allies in the region. So, I mean, obviously they're bad, but I mean, we've also been kind of creating this monster, so to speak, and it's pretty much been the way that it's been in Iran from the start. You know, this is par for the course for the United States. We stupidly fund things out of trying to be nice, or maybe we're just doing it on purpose to push conflict everywhere in the military-industrial complex. I don't know. It could be all of the above, you know, at this point. And this is just the way that games are played nowadays. There isn't some vast conspiracy. It's just all greed, and everybody's freaking too stupid to think about the repercussions as long as they get theirs. So it could be that. You know, based on the attack that Iran had launched a few weeks ago, I mean, we see some of their capabilities at the same time. Israeli and American and Jordanian air defenses were so fantastical that, you know, they really they didn't cause any damage to Israel despite the massive fusillade that they unleashed. And by many accounts, they did make an effort for it. They launched some decent weapons, decent as far as they're concerned. So I really don't know what to think here. What's going to happen here, and look, I'll be perfectly honest. Destabilizing Iran would be a good thing. I would love to see Iran destabilized and their government fall apart. I'm not going to make any qualms about it. I'm not going to give condolences here. This is a bad dude. You know, this could not have happened to a better person. Let's just be perfectly honest here. I am not the kind of person that will sugarcoat these things and be like, my condolences, my heart's in prayer. No, this is an evil individual, by all accounts, who has oppressed his people and who has been responsible either directly or indirectly for the deaths of, you know, countless of innocents, including Americans, throughout, you know, the decades and years that have followed. So, you know, it is, you know, it is what it is. You know, we're calling a spade here. You know, bad people get taken out sometimes, and the world is sometimes a better place for it. But there are always repercussions involved, and those repercussions, you know, no good deed goes unpunished, as they say. So if he was taken out by the West, you know, hopefully the calculus is that, hey, Iran is probably going to be destabilized. They're going to fall into some sort of civil conflict, and we've taken them off the board. And now the Middle Eastern trifecta of the new axis of evil, so to speak, including Russia and China, or I should say the anti-American axis, is now lost a very important element. And that may be the possibility here that we've moved on. We being, you know, maybe Israel and the U.S. or whoever have kind of moved to the next stage where it's like, well, we're going to start playing really dirty now, and we're going to use tactics that our enemies use because they're effective. I don't know. I really don't know. And again, there are enough people in Iran that would want to see this guy and a lot of these the Ayatollahs dead, that could just be a mechanic had some beef. It's like, hey, let's make sure this thing crashes at some point. He's going on there. Let's sabotage. So a lot of times the simplest answer is usually the one that is correct. So sometimes we don't need to be conspiratorial, and sometimes the outcome is the same as if, you know, hey, sometimes it's like, don't let a good crisis go to waste. It could be that, you know, Israel and the U.S. are just sitting there and they're like, man, this is great. Like, we couldn't have wished for something better to happen in this situation. And that's it. And now is when the exploitation of the power vacuum and the potential weakness in the Iranian political system will occur. whether it was induced or not. Or it could just, just an accident. That's just the way it is. So either way, I really don't know. Now, what are some of the repercussions? Obviously, if a war the greater conflict in the Middle East has been causing massive migration issues for the European Union. We've seen the civil unrest there. If you pay attention to various social media accounts, I think Radio Genoa is probably one of the best ones that you can follow. We see how Europe has been slowly invaded, and that is not even a joke. That's the right terminology, by migrants coming from the Middle East, mostly military-aged men. A lot of this, I feel, is by design, and we know that Iran has historically wanted to embed, terror cells within the West to be ready at a moment's notice to exploit us and to, basically take down the West from within. And it's a long game. Our adversaries are a lot more patient than we are in many cases because of our political cycle. Authoritarian regimes stick around for a long time so they can plan for the long term. Whereas because we're victims to our political process, for better or for worse, every 2 to 4 years, we're in a battle domestically for power, and that takes our eyes off the ball in a lot of cases. So, this is something that we really need to pay attention to. And again, what are the repercussions going to be if Iran becomes a failed state and if they fall into a civil conflict? Oil prices will go up regardless because they are a large oil provider. But it will also harm China a lot because, China gets a lot of their oil from Iran. It will put more pressure on Russia to up their production, especially to pick up the slack. Other countries aren't allowed to buy Russian oil, but China has no qualms about that kind of stuff. And so it'll be interesting to see how those logistics may be affected. Obviously, is this going to exacerbate the migrant issue in Europe? I think Europe needs to close their borders off. They've reached the point where they are going to end up having some sort of civil conflict within the EU because of the lack of regulation over their immigration is the biggest failure of the European Union, barring everything else. It really is, and it's a huge failure in the United States as well. But I do think that the problem, Europe is already a few years ahead of us, and in this, and the migrants that they're getting to definitely pose a much greater threat than what we're dealing with now. In the U.S., we do have to worry about, I think, jihadists exploiting the southern border, obviously fentanyl and the cartels coming in through the southern border, and the Chinese also sending their own agents through the southern border to try to become U.S. citizens and then, get anchor babies, things like that. So all of our adversaries are trying to exploit this, and Europe is just further ahead. The difference is that Europe does not have a Second Amendment. The European people really have no repercussions. So when this shit hits the fan for them, they're going to be pretty screwed, and it's going to be very nasty because you're going to be dealing with a very pacifistic culture that has for decades taken away their not only their ability to fight, but culturally they've removed their spine. There are still a few strong masculine men in Europe, but outside of the football hooligans, I don't know how many there are, and it may just be that they are overwhelmed already. So it's going to be up to the European people to rise up and let their governments know that they're not going to tolerate this crap. But they are going to be dealing with an enemy in potentially in Islamic extremism that they may not be able to handle. I know some people don't like when we talk about that, but that's a fact of the matter. Is like Islamic extremism never went away after September 11th. It's always something that's going to be there, and this is an ideology that can bide its time. And it doesn't mean the vast majority of Muslims are good people, but we know that in the midst of thousands of people coming from that region, it's very easy for extremists or sleeper cells to embed themselves within that. And because of the unrestricted and unregulated, essentially ghettos and no-go zones that exist within Europe, it would be very easy for these people to set up bases of operations that have absolutely no policing or investigation in them. So I think this, there's a lot of ways that this can go. Again, we live in interesting times, and that's usually, I don't think it's a good thing right now. And typically that Chinese proverb isn't meant to bring us joy or give us the feels. It is a warning a lot of times. So geopolitically, this is going to escalate an already tenuous situation. I think that the conflict in the Middle East right now has become so politically radioactive and so politically it's just become something unprecedented that this is now just going to add another layer here that can escalate the situation. Maybe if the hardliners really crack down and they're able to regroup after this, maybe they'll go even harder and try to launch terrorist attacks in the West. Maybe they'll start falling apart because there'll be some sort of revolution from the populace of Iran. We don't know either way, but it's definitely there's a lot of potential for really bad things to happen here. And as with everything that's been going on, we just have to pay attention. Now, ironically enough, how will this affect things here in the U.S.? I think that the pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel protests have actually been, politically, it's done the Biden administration an extreme amount of harm. I think that there is nothing that could have been, from an American perspective, it's shameful what we're seeing with those protests. I personally think, but it really there's nothing better that former President Trump really could have asked for in this situation, and it really shows the Achilles heel of the Democrat Party that they have always through the years created this broad coalition of groups that should be enemies. Like I don't understand why American Jews voted for the Democrat Party for the most part. Then you have a support of extremist Islamic groups and organizations like CARE, and then you saw the gender brigade over here, the LGBTQ community and their extremists, the feminazis, all of that, all these groups that are disparate, that have different goals and that should be adversaries, were under the tent of the Democrat Party for so long that now the chickens are coming home to roost because people are starting to see, Democrat donors have been bailing out. A lot of them were Jewish donors, and they don't like how President Biden has handled, withdrawing aid from Israel or potentially threatening to remove weapon sales and things like that. That's caused them harm. Obviously, the college infrastructure is something that the left has taken decades to exploit, and essentially that's kind of how the modern left in America came to be through various schools of thought that immigrated from Europe into the education system here. The progressive movement, the socialistic left wing, far left movements that have permeated through universities. So it really is the chickens coming home to roost in this situation, and it's not something that I thought that we were going to see this soon. It's something I knew was inevitable, but I really figured that it was something that was going to happen 1 or 2 years down the line. But this is kind of the social unrest that we are seeing here today, and this will only add to it. And I think Benny Johnson was on, and you guys, I'm sure you all know Benny Johnson was on. This is a slight tangent. Was on Tim Pool's show the other day, and congrats to Benny for breaking 2 million. And he seems to think that the election is over. It's done. That President Trump is going to win in a landslide, and that the Democrat Party has basically accepted the inevitable, and that's why we're seeing a passage within Congress. And a lot of Republicans are jumping on this bandwagon too, or it's embedded in these massive bills that no one can read. A lot of restrictions on the executive branch and the presidency, which honestly, I'm not that really opposed to, but in general, but when you see the motivations behind it, you can see what really is going on here. And that is, I think they've accepted the inevitability of a second Trump presidency, at least according to Benny. And that now they're trying to put guardrails in place to basically limit the quote unquote damage in their eyes that Trump could cause. And so now they know they can't do. They know that any sort of sketchiness in November, I'm not going to be specific because YouTube doesn't like when you talk about certain things. They know any sketchiness in November will destroy all faith in the institutions at this point, so they can't make that move again or use the media in that way. Social media, that's where I really think that the sketchiness occurred, and withholding information and manipulating things, not necessarily some of the more crazy theories involving corporations that build machines that are used for certain things. I don't really give credence to those. I think that it was a lot easier and simpler than that, because usually the more complex a plan is, the more likely it is to fail. Usually it's the simple things that work the best. And I think that there was a withholding of information. I think the Hunter Biden laptop and that not coming out at the right time had a massive influence on that. I think we're seeing the Ashley Biden diary is something that's now kind of been shown that it's true. So not something I've really talked about too much, but we're starting to see those things as well. So it almost seems like, yes, they're preparing that they know Biden's going to lose. They're basically kind of waving the white flag, and they're hoping that they can get through 4 years of Trump without him causing damage to the bureaucratic state. And then they can try to move on, and both the Republican and Democrat parties can go back to business as usual, which is where they are two wings of the same bird. And there are a few people on the fringes that oppose the establishment, but ultimately they are one and the same, and are being exploited by mega corporations and the like. So at least that's what I've come to think. And I think a lot of people probably share that sentiment. But we will see. We won't know until things happen. Obviously, President Trump is going through a court case right now that doesn't seem to be going very well for the opposition. Michael Cohen, no surprise, is a bad dude and has lied about a lot of things. And regardless of what you may think about if former President Trump lied, like in this court of law, it's like, well, which one's the worst liar and who's going to get owned here? We'll see how that works. It was always the weakest of all the cases that they tried to bring up on Trump. The feds didn't want to do it. So I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But it's in New York, so strange stuff can happen. I personally think it's going to be a hung jury, if you want to ask me. But I don't know. That's why I haven't talked about it. It's a legal case that I'm not really interested in discussing, because there's nothing we can do either way. And I think if you believe that President Trump didn't do anything wrong here, you're embedded in that. There's nothing that's going to convince you otherwise, and vice versa. If you believe that he's guilty, it's going to be the same thing. So I mean, there's really nowhere to go except to wait and see what happens in all this. And I think that's pretty much where we are. I'm not sure. I don't know if there are a lot of people that are. There are people that are persuadable, and we've seen it because of all the things that are happening and how the Democrat coalition is kind of falling apart. The social coalition, I should say. So there are people that are being pushed, but I think, Trump is basically a known commodity at this point. If you liked him or you hated him, I don't know what can happen unless you feel that you've been lied to, unless you discover like, oh my goodness, like, Biden was lying the whole time, or he really is senile and they covered all this stuff up. If that's new information for you, then I guess you could be persuaded, but I think everybody's kind of made their minds up. So it's going to come down to who goes out to vote and who turns out. And I think that'll be the biggest defining factor. And the polls seem to be showing that, President Trump is going to win, potentially in a landslide, but the polls are never to be trusted. And they can also exploit you. So that's kind of what I see here. Russia's also been launching a massive counterattack in Ukraine. I don't know where that's going to go. I think this is going to be more of a slog for them. But I think it's inevitable that Ukraine is going to lose that conflict. And I think the West just needs to, that's one that we need to accept too, and regroup and start rebuilding our militaries as well. Ukraine, there's a report that came out that $40 million of the aid that went to Ukraine disappeared. And oh my goodness, even Secretary Blinken said that, Ukraine is a corrupt country. So why the hell are we giving a known corrupt country money hand over fist to stick it to Vladimir Putin? It's like, look, I get it. Vladimir Putin is not an ally to the U.S. He's not a good dude, no matter what we think. I think that he is a deft politician, and he is a more effective leader than a lot of American politicians that we see strategically and tactically. He is much more intelligent. He understands the history of his country and the history of the world better than most American politicians. And so, but, he does participate in political assassinations, exploits the weaknesses of his adversaries, and is, by all accounts, an authoritarian. But does that mean that we need to throw money hand over fist when we can just say, look, NATO nations, you guys have to step up your game, increase your military spending? Because I think even if the U.S. hasn't been fully tested yet, I think it's pretty easy to see how we can be exploited. And right now, we're seeing the exploitation of the U.S. in full effect. Open borders, we have our own border invasion here. Military readiness is at an all-time low, and morale has dropped because of another subject that we're going to talk about, which is the diversity, equity, and inclusion, a training that has poisoned not only corporate America and the U.S. government, civilian sectors, but the U.S. military, with injecting bullshit that has nothing to do with warfighting capability, and that does nothing but undermine the confidence that we have in our military, and make us less effective as a fighting force, and disincentivize people who have been in the military for years to continue on because they don't want to get caught up in that woke bullshit that has nothing to do with the reasons that they joined, which was to serve their country and, fight against our enemies and protect against our enemies, foreign and domestic. So that's something that's a weakness that we've got, being the U.S. Navy's readiness has been pretty abysmal lately. We've seen a lot of ship collisions. We had 2 destroyers and a submarine that had collisions either with other ships or undersea mountains. We've had a lot of malfunctions of equipment. We had, the MV-22 Osprey air fleet, the tilt rotor aircraft, that can go from, pseudo helicopter to airplane. They had a massive crash that was the worst in the Marine Corps in a while. A couple of months ago, the entire fleet within the Marine Corps, the Air Force, and the Navy had to be grounded. Now they've been, some of those restrictions have been lifted, but they can't fly more than 30 minutes away from a base that can sustain them. So good luck. Good luck if the war is more than 30 minutes away from an airfield or an aircraft carrier. Those Ospreys cannot operate, which for the Marine Corps, that is their bread and butter for deploying Marines throughout the battle space. That is a serious problem. The U.S. Navy has been switching to the CMV-22 Osprey, which is their cargo variant for, carrier replenishment. So carrier cargo drops and things like that. It's replacing the C-2 Greyhound cargo plane. And there are no plans to go beyond 2026 with the C-2 Greyhound. So if the Osprey is done and there's a major design flaw, the Navy COD operations are also going to be undermined. Which will affect, anything, any sort of operations that we may have against China. And obviously we've been giving weapons and ammunition to Ukraine hand over fist. We're helping Israel out right now and using a lot of our advanced weaponry there, which honestly, even though I've always been against, foreign aid, again, this is one of those circumstances where it's like, well, we've literally been giving Iran money for the last few years. So I was like, we got to help Israel out in this one because we've put them in a position where they're screwed. So, you know, I know a lot of people on the conservative side have become more and more anti-foreign aid. But this is one of those circumstances where I'm like, bro, like we gave their enemies money. Like, what do you want us to do? Like, we basically helped create this situation in a lot of cases. So it sucks. So we have all of these things. And then obviously China with their shenanigans, a potential 3 or 4 front war, if you consider the border another front in this operational battle space throughout the world that the DOD may have to reconcile, then the U.S. is stretched pretty thin right now. And even though we've proven ourselves, you know, the operations in the Red Sea against the Houthis have been very, you know, for the most part, very successful as far as the U.S. Navy is concerned. Some of our European allies have shown that they are a little bit, their navies leave much to be desired because they have neglected them. So we've had German and Danish ships have serious malfunctions of their anti-aircraft systems, and they've had to, you know, bring those ships back. You know, obviously putting a strain on the U.S. and Royal Navies. The British, for those that don't know that vernacular, the Royal Navy is the British Navy. So, you know, we're in a vulnerable state right now, and it doesn't seem like that's going to improve anytime soon. So everything that we're seeing in Iran may not be a coincidence, because maybe that's the move that we've got. Maybe it's a desperation play that's like, you know what? We know we're not in a great position, so maybe we got to start playing a little bit dirty here the way that our enemies would play dirty against us. And we know that, you know, sometimes, you know, and I hate to say this because, you know, political assassinations are pretty bad. It's not something that you would really want to start getting into. That's how World War I was started. But, you know, when you get to the point where, you know, when you deal with a lot of these authoritarian regimes, they don't like to show any weakness and they don't like to admit when they failed. And so sometimes you can kind of get away with doing stuff against them that they won't retaliate against, because they know that by retaliating, they've admitted that they've failed. Like if let's say that an intel agency did take out the president of Iran here, do they want to admit it? Or would that show such an extreme amount of weakness on their part that it would be actually worse for them to admit it? You know, that's what it is. Magnum Norris says, for $10, Biden takes money from our enemies. Well, it certainly seems like money came from Burisma in China at some point. So, I mean, that's not a statement that is too far-fetched based on a lot of the things that we've seen. But, you know, we'll find out. Hunter Biden, right? Thank you, Magnum Norse, for the $10. Magna Defender for $5 dropped a super chat as well. So thank you to you. It's 2024. The media refuses to be quiet about the coup. Guys, the coup is 100% over. The only variant I care about is the going bankrupt variant. Well, you know, the media is always going to talk about different things. And now, of course, we have Elon Musk calling for the arrest of Fauci and, you know, the NIH admitting the gain of function research that they had. So I'm sure that, you know, certain talks about certain things and that and the like that happened over the last few years, maybe some of that talk is going to go down, especially if we find out that the U.S. may have been involved with China in developing this weaponized virus, because that's what I've, you know, believed that the coup is. But we'll find out more. And again, this is one of those subjects that, you know, they don't like you to talk about too much. So we'll leave it at that without going too far. So, again, interesting things happening. Let's close out this article and go from here. Actually, okay, we've got like a couple of paragraphs left, and then we will move on to the next one. He being the president of Iran is viewed as a protege of Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei, and some analysts have suggested he could replace the 85-year-old after his death or resignation from the role. Raisi won Iran's 2020 presidential election, a vote that saw the lowest turnout in the Islamic Republic's history. I mean, it was probably a sham election no matter what, even if it had high turnout. He's sanctioned by the U.S. in part of his involvement in the mass execution of thousands of political prisoners in 1988 at the end of the bloody Iran-Iraq War. Under Raisi, Iran now enriches uranium at nearly weapons-grade levels and hampers international inspections. Iran has armed Russia in its war on Ukraine and launched a massive drone and missile attack on Israel amid its conflict in Gaza. It's also continued arming proxy groups in the Middle East like Yemen's Houthi rebels and Lebanon's Hezbollah. So I don't think that we got any update here. Let's see. Nope. That's where we're at. So, So again, we'll see. I gave you my 2 cents there. It was closer to $1 since that was like a 1 hour and 15-minute rant / analysis on some of the potential issues here with the a power vacuum in Iran and some of the things that are affecting us on the international stage today. Dump the Osprey, bring back the Huey, says Arleon. I think the Osprey, the concept of the Osprey has always been very good. VTOLs have always been the stuff of video games and science fiction. And the appeal is definitely the appeal of having an aircraft that can function as a helicopter and travel as quickly and have the range of an airplane is, it's pretty obvious why you would want something like that. The Osprey has had many problems, especially early in its history. It has become a more mature platform, but clearly it still has issues. It seems like the problem that's been affecting it recently was one of the clutches in the engines. I don't know if that clutch is responsible for the tilting mechanism, or if it's a clutch that deals with the gearing of the engines. I would think that because the Osprey has such it has small rotors for a helicopter, massive rotors for an airplane. I wonder if that causes, when it's in airplane mode, so to speak, if that causes issues, if the fact that the engines are on outboard nacelles, if that causes some sort of aerodynamic problem or strain that other aircraft don't deal with. I'm not an aeronautical engineer, so I wouldn't be able to tell you. And it's not a subject that I've researched too much. But there's no doubt that's cool aircraft. I would never want to go in one. I think that the Osprey is kind of gained its reputation as a death trap pretty soundly over the years. And even though its safety record has improved, over the last decade pretty vastly, the platform just doesn't inspire confidence in me. So, yes, that's what I think is the deal there. So, I think let's go through a little bit. Some people don't know a little bit of the history of Iran, so I'll be a little bit brief here of when the Ayatollahs took over. If you know, before Iran was a theocratic authoritarian state, it was actually a pseudo kingdom kind of thing. It was ruled by the Shah of Iran, who was basically a U.S. puppet, let's be perfectly honest. And kind of his corruption and weakness led to Islamic extremists being able to overthrow his regime. We know, if you watch the movie Argo, you'll know all about the U.S. embassy hostage crisis there that only ended after Ronald Reagan was in office and basically threatened to bust some skulls. But the first Ayatollahs took over in 1979 during the revolution. So let's go kind of a little bit through the time of who Khomeini was, not Khomeini, it's a different guy. And kind of like a little bit of his history and how that came to be and where we are today. The war in the 1980s with Iraq was massive and had a lot of casualties and hurt both countries, but the U.S. was giving weapons to Iraq and Saddam Hussein. Ironic, isn't it? How we end up funding guys and then we go to war with them later on. And man, it's crazy. It's crazy stuff how that is. And then we kind of led to Iran being where I don't know why this happens. I don't know why this happens. I really don't understand. I really don't understand. All right. On February 1st, 1979, the Ayatollah Khomeini returned to Iran in triumph after 15 years of exile. The Shah and his family had fled the country 2 weeks before, and jubilant Iranian revolutionaries were eager to establish a fundamentalist Islamic regime under Khomeini's leadership. Born around the turn of the century, Ruhollah Khomeini was the son of an Islamic religious scholar, and in his youth memorized the Quran. He was a Shiite, the branch of Islam practiced by the majority of Iranians, and soon devoted himself to the formal study of Shia Islam in the city of Qom. A devout cleric, he rose steadily in the Shiite hierarchy and attracted many disciples. In 1941, British and Soviet troops occupied Iran and installed Mohammad Reza Pahlavi as the second modern Shah of Iran. The new Shah had close ties to with the West, and in 1953, British and U.S. intelligence agents helped him overthrow a popular political rival. You know, that's exactly what happened. Mohammad Reza embraced many Western ideas, and in 1963 launched his quote-unquote white revolution, a broad government program that called for the reduction of religious estates in the name of land redistribution, equal rights for women, and modern reforms. Khomeini, now known by the title Ayatollah, was the first religious leader to openly condemn the Shah's program of westernization. In fiery dispatches from his Fazieh seminary in Qom, Khomeini called for the overthrow of the Shah and the establishment of an Islamic state. In 1963, Mohammad Reza imprisoned him, which led to riots, and on November 4th, 1964, expelled him from Iran. Khomeini settled in An-Najaf, a Shiite holy city across the border in Iraq, and sent home recordings of his sermons that continued to incite his student followers. Breaking precedents with the Shiite tradition that discouraged clerical participation in government, he called for Shiite leaders to govern Iran. In the 1970s, Mohammad Reza further enraged Islamic fundamentalists in Iran by holding an extravagant celebration on the 2500th anniversary of the pre-Islamic Persian monarchy and replaced the Islamic calendar with a Persian calendar. As discontent grew, the Shah became more repressive, and support for Khomeini grew. In 1978, massive anti-Shah demonstrations broke out in Iran's major cities. Dissatisfied members of the lower middle classes joined the radical students, and Khomeini called for the Shah's immediate overthrow. In December, the army mutinied, and on January 16th, 1979, the Shah fled. Khomeini arrived in Tehran in triumph on February 1st, 1979, and was acclaimed as the leader of the Iranian Revolution. With religious fervor running high, he consolidated his authority and set out to transform Iran into a religious state. On November 4th, 1979, the 15th anniversary of his exile, students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and took the staff hostage. With Khomeini's approval, the radicals demanded the return of the Shah to Iran and held 52 Americans hostage for 444 days. The Shah died in Egypt of cancer in July 1980. In December 1979, a new Iranian constitution was approved, naming Khomeini as Iran's political and religious leader for life. Under his rule, Iranian women were denied equal rights and required to wear a veil. Western culture was banned, and traditional Islamic law and its often brutal punishments were reinstated. In suppressing opposition, Khomeini proved as ruthless as the Shah, and thousands of political dissidents were executed during his decade of rule. In 1980, Iraq invaded Iran's oil-producing province of Khuzestan. After initial advances, the Iraqi offensive was repulsed. In 1982, Iraq voluntarily withdrew and sought a peace agreement, but Khomeini renewed fighting. Stalemates and the death of thousands of young Iranian conscripts in Iraq followed. In 1988, Khomeini finally agreed to a UN-brokered ceasefire. After the Ayatollah Khomeini died on June 3rd, 1989, more than 2 million anguished mourners attended his funeral. Ali Khamenei became supreme leader. Gradual democratization began in Iran in the early 1990s, culminating in a free election in 1997, in which the moderate reformist Mohammad Khatami was elected president. Well, we see how that worked out. But yeah, so that's just a brief history of how Iran came to be what it is today. So I think it's always important to go through that. You have to understand your enemies and where they came from and what some of their motivations are if you want to be able to, fight against them. And I think that's something that Tim F., that's a very awkward question and not one that I'm going to answer. I am a single man. We will leave it at that, and I have been for quite a long time. So it has been quite a long time. It has been almost a year at this point, three quarters of a year. So General Storm and Norman of the Gulf War. General Schwarzkopf, I'm not sure what happened to General Schwarzkopf. So yeah, it's all good, man. Zach Carr, what's going on? And so I'm not sure what happened to General Schwarzkopf. He was a brilliant strategist, and I think that we have not had a general sense. And you can see kind of the way that the initial invasion of Iraq during Desert Storm and how the 2003 invasion of Iraq are. And though the Iraqi military was taken out in only a few days in 2003, when you see just how successful Desert Storm was and how organized it was, it makes the 2003 invasion look like, it was run by rookies in comparison. So, that's how it is. So, I think Storm and Norman was probably the last truly, truly great general that we've had. Mattis, by all accounts, was a great general as well, but he did not have he never had to prove himself in kind of that grand strategy role that Schwarzkopf did. He dealt with the insurgencies and things like that. So kind of a different general for a different time. I think Schwarzkopf is kind of the general that type of general is what we will need in a pure state conflict. And I don't know if we have that leadership within the military today. It's something that we would have to, kind of find out. So it is interesting. So yeah, time really does fly. This is already episode 17 of Rolo's Rants, which I can't believe. And we've done so many game streams and all that stuff. Like really the last year, the last few years have really flown by. A lot of crazy things have happened, good and bad, but hey, we're still here. I'm here better than ever. And the journey of life continues. And, that's the way it is, win, lose, or draw. That's how it works. So Mattis has been interesting. Beloved by his Marines, but yeah, sometimes he's a little bit sketchy. I know that, some of his jobs post-military, a lot of these guys, they join defense contractors or become lobbyists, and then it's always a little bit questionable what their motivations are or were. But I'm not sure what happened to Schwarzkopf in the meantime, but he was definitely a great general. So speaking of not great military leaders, let's move and pivot here to something that I alluded towards earlier, which was DEI within the U.S. military. And I had this pulled up, but now it eludes me. So let's look this up again, and then we will check this out. Time does fly the older you get, ladies and gentlemen. That is absolutely true. I've noticed it as as I've gotten older in the years. Time really does fly. So, but hey, Schwarzkopf. That's right. He did pass away, and that's what I thought. I wasn't sure when he passed away, so that's why we haven't heard him. So. General Colin Powell does have his rep too. I think he was a good general as well, though, from a warfighting perspective. So, but let's bring this up. So Louder with Crowder, who, some days I like Crowder, some days I don't. Sometimes his humor leaves a little bit to be desired. But hey, he's cool. Quarter Black was awesome. Quarter Black is one of the coolest people that I've ever met. Nice guy, love him. He's a great asset for Gary Nerdrotic. So I'm sure he did great work for Crowder as well. But Steven Crowder was able to get some hidden camera footage. One of his reporters with the U.S. Navy's top diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI, or we call it DIE. We flip that around because that's all it causes organizations to do is die. Had an undercover journalist embedded, and some strange things happen. So this video is about 4.5 minutes. So I'm going to play the whole thing and bring this up because I think it's worth watching, and then we'll discuss it and see what you guys think and what my opinion is on this. So let's bring this up. Boom.
Not like a journalist, right? 70% of my job is advising. I advise to to the top 3 in the Navy on equal opportunity, diversity, equity, inclusion. New Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Lisa Franchetti.
What's her deal? What's her deal?
She just really, she believes in diversity, equity, inclusion, and equal opportunity. She's the first woman Joint Chief of Staff. If Trump's the president, then there is no more DEI. It goes away. He said he's going to shut down the office at the Pentagon. It'll go away. So that would change things. If we have a Republican in office, it will bolster our military. If we have a Democrat, it'll continue to just be the make do with what you have, you know, kind of, you know, slap things together, put duct tape on it, that kind of stuff. Or training, that kind of thing. And I'm a Democrat. So, but I'm just, from a strictly military standpoint, Republicans are always better for military.
I was going to say, I was thinking, like, if Trump gets in and, like, your job would be at risk already.
My job will still exist. It's just, like I was telling you, DEI I wouldn't be able to come out and say, I'm a DEI practitioner. It's like now I can say.
What would you say?
I would just say I'm an equal opportunity advisor.
Right.
And climate specialist. And I would just, like I told you, I'd skirt around DEI. Well, if we're looking at the diversity and the equity, the diverse force of the Navy, and how we're all, and where we are as far as equality, and are these people that are diverse, are they included on the decision making? You would have to be a player.
Do you get a hard time about it at work at all?
About diversity, equity, inclusion? Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. I think it's a waste of time. Except my boss. I mean, the Lisa, Admiral, she doesn't think it is. She likes it. But
the Smithsonian.
Everybody else is like, You know, what's going to happen when the first missile hits the first side of the first DEG? What's it going to matter? There won't, diversity, equity, inclusion will just be out the window. There's no worry about Israel and all that stuff.
There's not? What is the worry?
China. All we ever talk about is, oh, well, you know, none of this is going to matter when China invades Taiwan. That's the buzzword.
I've been hearing that. I mean, that's been there's been discussions of that happening, right?
Yeah. I mean, our biggest foe right now is China. That's our worry. Nobody else. You know, we don't worry about Israel and Gaza. We're like, okay, they can figure this out themselves. We'll, you know, Ukraine, Russia, yeah, whatever.
China. Oof. What's that going to look like?
Not good.
Is it cybersecurity? Is it economic? Is like they're stealing our information?
No,
is it them?
So it's like everything, really. I mean, like think about it. Like if we went to war with China, it would escalate into a world war. We may end up speaking Chinese. I mean, let's be honest.
So what happens if Trump comes in and it goes away?
Equal opportunity will never go away. It'll just shift from me talking about diversity, equity, inclusion to equal opportunity based on the culture of excellence and how we work. How do we create a diverse force that's equal and inclusive of everything? So I don't come out and say, yeah, DEI. I have to change all my verbiage to make it sound good.
Do you think he has a chance to actually win?
I think he will. I think he's going to win, hands down. Unless something happens.
Like what?
Like he goes to jail, something like that. Or somebody kills him. I mean, I hate to say it, but you know, that's kind of the only way people don't have a lot of faith in Biden. I mean, he's really old, too.
So yeah, there you go. That that pretty much gets it across. So, I mean, I don't think that there's anything that we're too surprised about when you hear about this. I think, you know, this is something that that's been poisonous within the military for a while now. You know, my old man has talked about this towards the tail end of his career, and still, being involved in, knowing people that are still in the military and in the government space and things like that, and seeing all of that and how stupid it is. Like nobody actually cares about this stuff. Nobody thinks that it's useful or beneficial, especially the fighting force. The U.S. military has always been a meritocracy and was one of the first institutions that allowed integration of the races and really made headway with that without anything else being involved. Because when you're in a war fighting position, you really don't care what color or race or religion the person next to you is. You care about whether they can get the job done and you guys can get out of combat alive and help each other out. And that's really what it's always been about. It's been about meritocracy. Whoever is the best will get promoted. Obviously, there's politics involved with anything, especially the higher up the ranks you go. But for the most part, that's always been the expectation, the way that military has worked. And the military is also, an authoritarian hierarchy. You have a hierarchy where orders are expected to be followed, and there's a clear chain of command. So, DEI is not necessary. It is stupid and it undermines everything. And, we really need, really it just, really that's just the way it is. Russia has been, Russia's been pummeled a lot in the sense of they have a lot of casualties. I think that they will win the war. I think that if they can't take Kharkiv, and Kharkiv by all accounts is going to take a massive push that's going to get a lot of casualties. I think that that's really where they are, but I think it is inevitable that they're probably going to win that conflict, especially because I think Western support is going to drop. That's really where I think that's going to go as far as that conflict is concerned. I mean, we've read a lot of different articles, kind of going down that path as it is. I don't see, unless the West really puts everything they have into it, I just don't see how that is going to change, just because it comes down to manpower. Russia has, like 5 times the population of Ukraine. The average fighting age of the Ukrainian soldier now is like 42, 43 years old. And they don't want to draft their, under 24s because they will lose basically their entire ability to pretty much reproduce their population after a war if they lose that many young men. It will be a massive demographic loss, and it's a country that already had the zircon is highly overblown, its capabilities, Chris. It really is. Russia will win with conventional weaponry. This is why they've also pushed back the T-14 Armada. They're going to win through artillery and brute force. It's going to be very painful for them. And, anytime that you attack a city, you usually need 3 to 4 times the defenders of there. There's a good analysis on what Kharkiv would take and, kind of the back and forth and how it, went back and forth between the Soviets and the Nazis in World War II. And if you compare it to any of the sieges in World War II, you'll see that the amount of manpower that it takes to take a city is usually at a minimum 3 to 1, some cases 5 to 1. Against defenders. So it really is going to depend on how well supplied Kharkiv is. Is it inevitable? I think it will. I think it'll take them months to take it. And right now, I think Russia is taking a very pragmatic approach by doing probing assaults along their front lines. They've been able to push back, but you also have to understand that a country is not going to have its defensive lines right on the border. So, to some extent, Ukraine is going to allow the Russians to make their incursions because they can't have everything all along that defensive line. But are they going to lose? Yeah, I think Ukraine is absolutely going to lose in the long term. And Russia's not afraid about the losses that it's going to take. Really, they really aren't. So yeah, it's going to be costly. It's going to be very painful for them. So that's why. So it's going to take a long time for them, but it's inevitable. So I don't think that we're disagreeing. I just think that Russia has taken massive casualties. They're going to continue to take massive casualties, but they don't care if they take massive casualties. So I think that's really where it comes from. And, a lot of the battle space has changed. So they're going really old school. It's going to take infantry assaults and artillery and really deception. So they're going to do probing assaults. They're going to try to pull the Ukrainians in different directions, and then they're going to wear them down. So, that's how they're going to win this. It's going to be a war of attrition, and Russia can basically take their time at this point because there's really nothing unless NATO gets directly involved, which they really shouldn't, and that would cause it would be a disaster here. I think if Joe Biden really wants to lose the election faster, he'll get the U.S. involved. Donald Trump is not going to do that. Donald Trump will probably pull us completely out of Ukraine. And once that happens, it'll be months, just probably 2 or 3 months before Ukraine goes down, if they even continue to fight, So, I think that's pretty much where they are. It's an inevitability. It just depends on how quickly it's gonna take and how much more money the West wants to waste in this conflict. So that's really what it's going to come down to. But I think the Russians have the resolve. They've re-geared their military-industrial complex, and their morale doesn't seem to have been affected. Now that they've kind of know what's been going on, they've been at this for a couple of years. So, it's just gonna, that's where we're gonna go. And the West isn't gonna do shit. Like they're not gonna do shit about it. Like they could send advisors in there. They can do all that stuff. I don't think it's gonna escalate to the point where tactical nuclear weapons are used. I think Putin is way too smart for that. I think the West is too afraid of all of that stuff to happen. We'll try weird, sketchy things along the way, but I think that it's all, at this point, I think both sides kind of know where this is going to go, and it's going to end in a Russian victory. They will probably get the territories that they've taken. They will obviously keep, the Navy. They'll keep everything that they gained in 2014, whatever they've got now, and they will strike a deal where Ukraine will never be allowed to join NATO. Their military will be crippled forever. And if they're lucky, they will get the old deal where they were able to establish economic relations with the EU. But at this point, I could see the Russians just saying, fuck that, we're not going to allow it anymore. So, that's pretty much where it's at. This is all, I'm convinced that this conflict was for exactly what you're saying there. It was to cover the political corruption of Western politicians, and Joe Biden being one of those politicians, and to fund the military-industrial complex to an extent. That's really what the war in Ukraine is for the West. For Russia, it's a lot more than that, and that's why they're going to end up winning that. So, that's the way it is. So it's game over. It just depends on how long it's going to take. Now, as far as the DEI stuff, I think that just points to, again, where the U.S. military is right now in our level of readiness, which is kind of at, it's not great right now. We went over the Osprey. We talked about the incidents that the U.S. Navy has had. The U.S. shipbuilding capacity is, I believe China's shipbuilding capability is 200 times higher than that of the United States right now. We lack shipyards and workers to be able to work, to be able to fix our ships. So the U.S. Navy has, in some cases, a backlog of months and years on maintenance, on regular maintenance and dry dock capacity for our existing assets. And that's going to cause some major issues with us in readiness. We lost an amphibious assault ship a couple of years ago due to a fire, which was embarrassing. A multi-billion-dollar vessel that will take like a decade to replace, most likely. These are all the things that we're suffering through right now. And though the U.S. military has shown off, some of its capabilities in helping defend Israel, when we're dealing with a peer state adversary like China, even though their weapon systems aren't proven, I would argue that if their weapons are half as good as they say they are, that will probably be good enough, because I mean, we spoke about this a little bit last week. The U.S. is going to have to we're going to have to take all of our stuff over across the Pacific to take on China. So that's where we're going to go. And we're going to have to rely on our allies on a lot of this stuff. We really are. Like our merchant marine fleet, the U.S. pretty much has a non-existent merchant marine fleet at this point, which could be to our benefit because we can offload that and not lose any of our own civilian assets. When it comes to this, we know that privateering will be back on the menu. That's one of the strategies that the U.S. Navy had to throw out there, which the Chinese really got pissed off of. So basically government sanctioned piracy, which I think is pretty awesome. So these are all things that we'd have to worry about. I think that the greater issue is, could the U.S. military beat China? Yes. Can the U.S. population accept the casualties that will be required in order to do so, though? And I don't know if we have the mental wherewithal as a people, not in the military. Obviously, we still have some great men and women in the military who are capable and patriotic and will do what it takes to win the conflict. Do we have good enough leadership to be able to conduct these operations? The civilian leadership is obviously very lacking right now. And if Admiral Franchetti is more concerned about DEI than China, then, I would say that she seems like she's a pretty poor leader right now. But, as far as weapon capability, sure, I think that our weapons are more capable. The problem is we don't have enough of them. And what force would we bring to bear? And our allies are still years away from being able to do that. Now, we wouldn't go in a ground invasion. You have to understand, what are the goals? What would be the strategic and tactical goals of a war with China? For the United States, it would be preventing them from taking Taiwan. So not a ground invasion, not crippling their military necessarily. It's more of a prevent type of defense is what we would be doing there. So make it costly enough for them that they would give up, or that they would be degraded to the point where they would not be able to successfully complete an amphibious assault. That would be the goal of the U.S. military. So, China would not have the sea lift capability to, still doesn't have the sea lift capability to take all their troops in once. And the buildup that's going to be required for that is going to be very obvious. Like, we're going to see it coming for months. It doesn't matter what the Chinese do. It doesn't matter whether they use civilian vessels or, military vessels. They're not going to be able to do some sort of Red Dawn style attack where they use commercial airlines to paradrop troops. That's not going to happen. It's going to be brute force, and it's going to be thousands of missiles and rockets, massive amounts of air power and sea power. And they're going to be trying to soften Taiwan's defenses. Taiwan is going to fight tooth and nail over this. Their beaches are set up to be ignited. They literally have pipes filled with oil and gas running to their beaches on their west coast that can set their entire beaches on fire to help prevent an amphibious assault. It is going to be a distance covered that's going to be like 3 times that of the Normandy invasion. And they will have to require a force that's probably 3 or 4 times the size of the Normandy invasion force. So it will be by far the largest amphibious assault in history. So could we stop that? Yes. But it will depend on, the first salvos are going to be to test the United States, I think. So they will probably launch just massive strikes on Taiwan, and Taiwan's just going to get hit from the air and with missiles probably for weeks. I would think that that's how they're going to do it. And then the amphibious assault will come. So the problem is the U.S. Navy, what can the U.S. Navy bring to bear there? Like, how much of the fleet can the U.S. Send without compromising our national security? And that's the balance that we would have to draw. And this is where, having Russia and Iran involved in this type of attack would be useful for them. So would Russia launch another feint, maybe even not even doing an attack, but let's say that at this point, whenever Russia's ready, they already have, or when China's ready, they've already taken, Ukraine, or taken the parts of Ukraine that they've wanted. Would they amass another military force to act as if they're going to invade Europe or NATO and one of those countries, maybe mass a huge army in Belarus to look like they're going to take over the Baltic states. Even if they don't, they wouldn't even have to do it. Maybe they'd be willing to do that at the same time. That would be a two-front conflict now, where the U.S. is going to have to make some decisions. In Europe, we won't be able to rely on them to assist with China. Would Iran launch terrorist attacks? Cyber warfare is going to be another part that's involved in all this. So again, would we lose an aircraft carrier? I don't even know if aircraft carriers may be that big of a factor, because I think that we already know that carriers are going to be extremely vulnerable. I think that World War III will be to the aircraft carrier what World War II was to the battleship. I think the aircraft carriers will be shown as a strategic liability in a pure state conflict, unless their sole purpose is to carry thousands upon thousands of drones, which in that case, if you can carry thousands of kamikaze drones on an aircraft carrier instead of manned aircraft, and you overwhelm, some sort of Chinese invasion force, that's where you're going to go. But the Chinese are going to do the same thing. And if anything, the Chinese are ahead when it comes to using drone warfare and kind of pushing the drone swarm tactics. So which economy is going to be able to handle better the sacrifice? I think China has shown through their pandemic that they can control their population, that they can lock them down and do all these things. The U.S. population is not going to accept. Will the U.S. population accept not getting any of their electronics, a full boycott of Chinese products, losing 80% of our pharmaceutical products, and all of that? I don't know. I personally think that we will lose in the mental battle. That the American people, as soon as American ships are sunk, which they will be sunk, that is inevitable, when you're fighting against a country that is even half as powerful as you are, you're going to lose some assets. The Russians have lost a significant portion of their Black Sea fleet against Ukraine because of drones and suicide kamikaze boats. So, both navies are going to use tactics like that, I would think. I think that the U.S. Navy should just buy millions of Sea-Doo jet skis and make them suicide drones and drop them off the back of amphibious assault ships and just send them on their merry way. And that's kind of the tactics that we'll use. So it'll be interesting to see how much. I think it's going to require going back to basics, in the sense of we're going to need cheaper weapons that can be mass produced. And even if we lose our capacity to have, sophisticated chips and things like that, because we're going to lose some of that, and we're going to have to re-gear our economy to a war economy, which is going to take a while. I think that's what it's going to take. It's going to take cheaper weapons built in mass. So it's going to be drones. That's what it's going to be all about, and cheap missiles. And that's what it'll be. We have to try to overwhelm the Chinese. They're going to do the same crap to us. We're going to be in a non-permissive environment that's going to be dealing with jamming. GPS is not going to be reliable, so our smart weapons are not going to be as useful as they can be. SOCOM did their first kind of pure state exercise a few weeks ago, and these are some of the tactics and things that they ran into and that they simulated: mass drone strikes, loss of communications, loss of satellite coverage. So these are all the things that we're going to have to worry about in this conflict. The question is, will this fall within the timeline? And the Chinese are thinking the same thing. They know that they have a relatively small window of probably 5 years or less, where they can try to make a move before the U.S. and our allies are totally retooled. And that may even not be enough time. It may have to be in the next couple of years that they've got this window, because Japan is making an effort. South Korea is making an effort. That's another factor. Would the North Koreans get involved? And, imagine if the Chinese were able to convince the North Koreans to launch an all-out artillery barrage on Seoul while they're trying to attack Taiwan. That would be devastating. Absolutely devastating. So this is where pretty much where we're at right now. I think that because the Chinese are fighting on their home territory, and because their homeland is going to be like their aircraft carrier. That's it. And we're not going to invade China. That would never be the intention. We would never be able to do that anyway. It's just going to be prevention. That's what it's going to be. Prevention and isolation is going to be the name of the game. Can we prevent them from launching an amphibious assault that would be able to take on Taiwan? That's where I think we could win. If it's a full-on one-on-one, we're trying to take each other out fully, that's not going to work. Like we will not, I do not think that we can win that conflict without nuclear weapons because we're just not fighting on our territory. And the industrial capacity equation has been flipped. So China's almost in the position that the United States was as far as industry that, where the U.S. was in World War II, where we could just build thousands of expendable products all the time and launch them to the battlefield. We had a huge manpower advantage over the Germans. And the Japanese didn't have the natural resources or the industrial capacity to be able to stand up against us in the Pacific. So I think that's where we're looking at the reversal. This is why, it's so important for China to get more oil and things like that and to secure those natural resources for their military, because that's going to be their Achilles heel, is going to be oil above anything else, because logistically their supply chain is going to be super short. It's going to be 60 miles across the ocean. That's it. Whereas for us, it's going to be thousands of miles across the ocean and no way to easily resupply or reload our ships currently, which is something I discussed in the past of how our Arleigh Burke destroyers, which are the workhorse of the fleet, cannot be reloaded at sea. Who'd have thunk it? So a ship that carries like 120 missiles, thereabouts 100, let's say, and you need a certain portion of them to be anti-ship missiles to take on the Chinese fleet, and then the other portion to be air defense and anti-ballistic missile defense. How many of those can we deploy at once without compromising us? The Chinese and the Russians have submarines. They're not better than ours, but as long as there's a threat of submarines being able to attack, U.S. assets in different parts of the world, that's going to hinder how much we can send to take on the Chinese and commit. We have, I believe, 10 or 11 carrier strike groups in the U.S. Navy fleet right now. I believe that they're distributed pretty much a little bit more than half of them are in the Pacific. We can't launch, we can't send 6 carrier strike groups to take on China. That's insane. We would never do that. So what we send 3, 4, okay, that's not going to be enough. You're talking about, maybe 360 aircraft combined between those 4 carrier battle groups, and maybe supplies and logistics to run operations for like a month or 2 against China. And then what are you going to do? Rotate them with the other ones? What if there's other conflicts going around? So if it becomes a multi-front conflict and the U.S. Navy is the spear, we are going to be, our supplies are going to be cut short. So we really need our allies, and we really need expendable weaponry. And carriers are not expendable weapons, and neither are guided missile destroyers. And the cost per missile just doesn't make sense right now. So replenishment of all these supplies, they take, to build new missiles, it takes hundreds or thousands of hours now to build these weapon systems. In some cases, to build like a Joint Strike Fighter, it takes like a year. That's not a feasible thing right there. So I think going back to the basics, building cheaper aircraft, relying on 4th generation fighters, relying on drones that are essentially 4th generation, and there are missile trucks or just made to be suicide bombers, that's going to be the way to go. So that's how we're going to win it. The military is starting to push that way, but again, in 2 or 3 years, can we totally re-gear this, especially with all the conflicts that we're involved in right now by proxy? I really don't know. I really don't know. So that's kind of where we're at with all of this. That really is where we're at. And somehow I made it like 2 hours on this show talking about 2 subjects that are very, very closely related. There are a couple of other things that I did want to bring up. This one really has me concerned, but it's not something I'm really surprised about. And this goes to the Second Amendment space here, and that is the Department of Homeland Security admits to monitoring 3D printer purchases with the help of Amazon, eBay, and PayPal. Oh, man, you guys knew this was coming at some point because we know how incredible 3D printing has been for, hey, the Second Amendment and being able to build your own guns at home, which is obviously your constitutional right to be able to do that. Obviously, if you're not selling them to other people and things like that, but for your own private use, hey, they're great. You know, I love 3D printers. You guys know that we've had, I had Control Pew in the past. I wish that those episodes were still accessible to people, but alas, they're not. But we did a lot of coverage in the past on 3D printing, and went to the Bear Arms and Bitcoin conference about 2 years ago now. Wow, it's crazy how time flies, and got to see some of the best in the industry, showing some of the new technologies that they had. Got to mess around with some 3D printed guns there, and so it was inevitable that this was going to happen. We talked about how in Malaysia the rebels are using the FGC-9 against government forces and 3D printing their own guns. So, yeah, DHS is monitoring it now. So the Department of Homeland Security made a shocking admission while speaking about a Staten Island man who was arrested for making homemade firearms. The DHS, with the help of Amazon, eBay, PayPal, and others, is monitoring Americans buying 3D printers and 3D printing materials that could be used for making firearms. The Homeland Security Investigations New York's El Dorado Task Force, wow, that's a mouthful, which consists of various units for DHS, including the Homeland Security Investigations Federal Crimes Task Force, helped the New York Police Department raid the home of John Raya. The 57-year-old man was accused of manufacturing firearms without serial numbers and having several standard capacity magazines, which are against New York state law to own. New York law enforcement authorities arrested the man. After this raid, the task force showed off the guns and ammo it had seized during the raid. Sergeant Rayshawn Vaughn, commanding officer of the Homeland Security Investigations Financial Crimes Task Force, HSI FCTF, what a mouthful, spoke with the press after the raid and made some startling admissions. According to the investigator, DHS is tracking the sale of anything that can be used to create a firearm, including metal rails used in 3D printed guns. Not only is the government monitoring the sale of perfectly legal gun parts, but they are also tracking things such as the purchase of 3D printers. The vast majority of people who buy 3D printers do not use them to print guns, but buying too many printing supplies or printers can get you investigated by Homeland Security. Do you know how many people have turned this into an industry now? Like, you guys know that I'm into drones, and the drone space, if you go to like drone tuber channels, you will see that they have like, I think his name is Real Dobo. He has like 8 3D printers in his studio printing like propellers, accessories, parts for drones, camera mounts and all this stuff. Like, he's going to get monitored by DHS now, and he uses drones. So, that's going to be the next one too. I'm actually surprised that hasn't come up yet, considering how drones have been used in warfare. Now, that'll be the next one. So the drone restrictions are going to come down the pike. You're going to see 3D printers. Like, this is where all this stuff is going to go. There is no federal law against making homemade guns, though, even though the Biden administration demonizes the practice by calling privately manufactured firearms, PMFs, ghost guns. The lack of federal statute banning the PMFs means that DHS is investigating people for carrying out perfectly lawful commerce. If someone passes a certain threshold for purchasing 3D printing supplies, which DHS hasn't announced, the federal government admitted they would investigate the buyer and monitor their social media. Oh, man, you guys know I'm in trouble. More disturbing is that giant online retailers such as Amazon and eBay and payment processors such as eBay are turning over sales records of anyone who purchased a certain amount of items, including 3D printers, every 2 months to authorities to sift through. None of those being investigated broke any laws for their purchases. Yeah, so there you go. To many, this would be like investigating anyone who buys a car because they might buy one to use as a getaway vehicle to be used during a bank robbery. In an article published by AmmoLand a couple of weeks ago, the FBI was quoted as saying that they cannot investigate people for constitutionally protected conduct, but that seems to be what DHS is doing when it comes to buying 3D printers and legal gun parts. Quote, we just basically track internet purchases from eBay, PayPal, Amazon, different various online companies, Vaughn said. We get a list every other month, backdated a month, with people purchasing components that could possibly create a ghost gun, like the rails of the 3D printer, end quote. This practice reminds the gun community about the Gun Violence Prevention through Financial Intelligence Act. The act, which would require the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN, we've talked about them in the past, to help banks track gun purchases so they can notify the federal government. This time it is reversed. The big tech giants that take gun owners' money are turning over thousands of records to the federal government on the suspicion that someone might make their own gun, even though that is not federally illegal and it is legal in most states. The gun community has a deep distrust of the government and perceives the FBI, DHS, and the ATF to be big brother-like entities. In monitoring of lawful commerce, these departments are doing nothing to build trust with the people of the country. AmmoLand News will file a Freedom of Information Act request to get more details on the monitoring programs to determine how widespread and long it has been in effect. If you bought a 3D printer, especially in a state like New York, you should know that Big Brother might be watching you. And of course, this article was written by John Crump, the man, the myth, the legend, the greatest Second Amendment journalist that the world has ever seen, and a true American hero. So, stay thirsty, my friends. Don't be surprised by this. You should always know that this stuff is going on. They're not going to be able to stop it. You can't stop the signal. The plans are out there. It's already done. It is over with. 3D printers are here to stay. They will be used to create firearms. They're going to be used to create a lot of different things. As the technology advances, we will be able to print metal, and you won't need weird plastic thingamajigs or be reliant on gun parts. We have, CNC machines like the Ghost Gunner that can turn a block of metal into an AR-15 lower receiver. So, I mean, these are here. They are here to stay. They will never go anywhere. There's nothing the government can do about it. There's nothing the anti-gun people can do about it. The genie is out of that bottle, and we have already won the battle. The question is, will we win the battle for our rights? And that is a battle that we fight every single day. And that is why my favorite quote will always be, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. So I have said it, so it is. Thank you, everybody. This was episode 17 of Rolo's Rants, the final episode here on the Puerto Rican Pistolero YouTube channel. Truly the end of an era. It is bittersweet, but here is looking forward to the start of a new chapter and the start of something great going into the future. I will be back next week on the Rolo's Rants YouTube channel at the same time, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. On this channel, we will be back with Fortnite streams on Thursday and maybe some random gaming streams. So Thursday and Friday, we'll be back. On Friday, Hypnotic will be joining us. We will have a full Puerto Rican squad in Fortnite, which should be a lot of fun. So looking forward to that. There may be more Destiny, which I think a lot of people don't like to watch, but I like to play, so I'm going to stream it anyway. So thank you all, everybody. Thank you to those who re-upped their memberships on this channel. Obviously, the new channel is not going to be monetized for a really long time, but you will be able to support through Cash App or Streamlabs. The links will be in the videos. That will support both channels. So if you'd like to support the work that I do here and the shenanigans that I get into with Commander and in the Old Man, then it is always appreciated, but never required. Thank you all, and God bless you. God bless America, and have a wonderful week. We'll see you on the next one.